The knock came at midnight, so desperate and urgent that Jack Jefferson had his gun drawn before his feet hit the floorboards. Through the rough-hewn door of his modest ranch house outside Vulture City, Arizona Territory, he could hear ragged breathing and a sound that made his chest tighten, the unmistakable catch of barely suppressed sobs. He yanked the door open, weapon raised, and found himself staring at a woman who looked like she had walked through hell itself. Her dress was torn at the shoulder, revealing angry purple bruises that spread like storm clouds across her collarbone. One eye was swollen nearly shut, and blood trickled from a split in her lower lip. She swayed on her feet, blonde hair matted with dust and something darker, her green eyes wide with terror even as they struggled to focus on him. "Please," she whispered, and then her knees buckled. Jack caught her before she hit the porch, holstering his gun in one smooth motion as he scooped her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, and up close he could see more bruises disappearing beneath the neckline of her dress, could see the way her hands were scraped raw. She had fought back, he realized. She had fought hard. He carried her inside, kicking the door shut behind him, and laid her gently on his bed. The moonlight streaming through the window illuminated her face, and despite the damage done to her, he could see she was beautiful. More than that, though, he could see she was terrified. "You are safe here," he said quietly, moving to light the oil lamp on his bedside table. "I am going to get some water and bandages. I will not hurt you." Her good eye tracked him as he moved across the room, wariness in every line of her body. He understood. Whatever had happened to her, whoever had done this, had broken something fundamental in her ability to trust. Jack had been 26 years old for exactly 3 weeks, and in those 26 years he had seen plenty of violence. He had fought in range wars, had tracked rustlers across the Sonoran Desert, had stared down claim jumpers and worse. But something about the sight of this woman, battered and broken on his bed, made a rage build in his chest unlike anything he had felt before. He returned with a basin of water, clean cloths, and the medical supplies he kept for emergencies. Living out here, 15 miles from the nearest town, a man learned to be his own doctor or he did not survive long. "My name is Jack Jefferson," he said as he sat carefully on the edge of the bed. "What do I call you?" She watched him for a long moment, then whispered, "Deanna. Deanna Lambert." "Deanna," he repeated, keeping his voice gentle. "I need to clean these wounds. It might sting, but I will be as careful as I can. Will you let me help you?" She nodded, just the smallest movement of her head, and he set to work. He started with her face, dabbing gently at the cut on her lip, cleaning the blood away with careful strokes. She flinched at first but gradually relaxed, though her breathing remained shallow and quick. "Who did this to you?" he asked quietly, her good eye filled with tears. "Martin. Martin Keller, my husband." The word hung in the air between them. Husband. Jack's jaw tightened, but he forced himself to continue working, moving to clean the scrapes on her hands. He had suspected as much. In his experience, the worst violence against women usually came from the men who claimed to love them. "Where is he now?" "I do not know. I waited until he passed out from drinking and I ran. I have been walking for hours. I saw your light." Her voice broke. "I did not know where else to go." "You did the right thing," Jack assured her. "You are safe now. He will never touch you again." Something in his tone made her look at him fully, and even through the pain and fear in her expression, he saw a flicker of hope. It was that hope that settled something in his chest, that made a silent promise to himself that he would do whatever it took to keep it alive. As he worked, she told him her story in fragments, words tumbling out between winces of pain. She had met Martin Keller in San Francisco 6 months ago, had been swept up in his charm and promises. He was a prospector, he told her, about to make it rich in the Arizona territory. He painted pictures of a beautiful life, and she, an orphan who had been working as a seamstress and living in a boarding house, had believed him. They married quickly and traveled south. But the mine claims Martin boasted about were mostly lies, and what little gold he found went straight to whiskey. The first time he hit her was 3 weeks after they arrived in Vulture City. He apologized, swore it would never happen again. But it did, again and again. "Tonight was the worst," she said, her voice barely audible. "He said I looked at the bartender wrong. I did not even speak to the man. But Martin, he gets these ideas in his head when he drinks, and nothing I say makes a difference." Jack finished bandaging her hands and sat back, studying her. Even in her current state, he could see the strength in her. She had survived, she had fought, she had run. Not every woman in her position would have had that courage. "How old are you, Deanna?" 22, she said. "I know I was foolish to marry so quickly, to trust someone I barely knew, but I thought," her voice cracked, "I thought someone finally wanted me." "You were not foolish," Jack said firmly. "You trusted someone who did not deserve it. That is his failing, not yours." She looked at him with such gratitude that it made his chest ache. He stood, suddenly aware of how inappropriate it was for them to be alone like this, her in his bed, him sitting close enough to smell the lavender soap she must have used that morning before her world fell apart. "You should rest," he said. "Take the bed, I will sleep in the chair by the fire." "I cannot take your bed," she protested weakly. "You can and you will. In the morning we will figure out what comes next, but tonight you need sleep and safety, and I mean to give you both." He turned to go, but her voice stopped him. "Jack, thank you, for not turning me away, for not asking me what I did to make him angry." He looked back at her, his blue eyes fierce in the lamplight. "There is nothing you could have done that would make this right. No man worth the name raises his hand to a woman. You remember that?" She nodded, tears slipping down her bruised cheeks, and he left her to rest, closing the door softly behind him. But sleep did not come easily as he settled into the worn armchair by the fireplace. His mind was too full of Deanna Lambert, of the fear in her eyes and the courage it must have taken to run, and of Martin Keller, who had better pray Jack never found him in a dark alley. The night passed slowly. Jack dozed fitfully, jolting awake at every small sound, his hand instinctively reaching for the gun he kept close. He was a light sleeper anyway, a habit formed from years of living alone in territory where danger could come from any direction, but tonight his senses were especially heightened. As dawn began to paint the desert sky in shades of pink and gold, he heard movement from the bedroom. He stood, stretching the stiffness from his shoulders, and knocked gently on the door. "Come in," Deanna called, her voice stronger than it had been the night before. He found her sitting up in bed, looking small and fragile in his too large shirt, which she must have found and changed into during the night. Her torn dress lay folded on the chair. In the morning light, the bruises looked even worse, a violent rainbow of purple, blue, and sickly yellow spreading across her visible skin. "How are you feeling?" he asked, sore, afraid, but better than last night. She attempted a smile that made her split lip crack. She winced, touching it gently. "What happens now?" Jack had been thinking about that all night. "That depends on what you want. You have choices, Deanna. You do not have to go back to him." "I know, I will not go back. I would rather die." She said it with such conviction that he believed her absolutely. "But I have no money. Nowhere to go. Martin controlled everything." "The law might help," Jack suggested, though even as he said it, he knew how hollow it sounded. The territorial laws were improving, but a man's rights over his wife were still considerable, and sheriffs were often reluctant to interfere in what they considered domestic matters. Deanna shook her head. Martin has friends. The sheriff drinks with him. Even if the law took my side, which they probably would not, what then? Wait for Martin to come after me. He would. He told me once that I belonged to him, and that if I ever tried to leave, he would find me and make me sorry. Jack's hands clenched into fists at his sides. Then we make sure he cannot find you. How? I have a sister in Prescott. She runs a boarding house there, respectable place. You could work for her, earn your keep while you figure out what comes next. It is a good distance from Vulture City. You could start fresh. Hope flickered across her face, followed quickly by suspicion. Why would you help me? You do not even know me. It was a fair question. Jack asked himself the same thing. But looking at her, remembering how she had looked on his doorstep last night, desperate and terrified and still fighting, he knew the answer. Because it is the right thing to do, he said simply. And because no one deserves what he did to you. Deanna studied him for a long moment, and he felt the weight of her gaze, assessing, trying to determine if he was another Martin Keller in disguise. He kept his expression open, letting her look her fill. Finally, she nodded. I would be grateful. For the help getting to Prescott. For the chance to start over. Then it is settled. We will leave tomorrow morning. That gives you another day to rest and heal and gives me time to arrange things here. Tomorrow, she looked alarmed. Is that not too soon? What if Martin comes looking for me? All the more reason to leave quickly. My ranch hand, Tom, can manage the place while I am gone. It is only a few days' ride to Prescott. We will take the back trails, avoid the main roads. If Keller is looking for you, he will expect you to head toward the stage routes. Deanna nodded slowly, but he could see the fear still lurking in her eyes. He could not blame her. She had run from one dangerous situation, and now she was putting her safety in the hands of a stranger. It was a leap of faith, and he intended to prove himself worthy of it. I will make us breakfast, he said. You should stay in here out of sight. Tom will be here soon, and the fewer people who know about you, the better. He left her and set about making coffee and frying bacon over the cook stove. The familiar routine helped settle his thoughts. He had been living alone on this ranch for 3 years now, ever since he had saved enough from working as a tracker and guide to buy the land and build the house. It was a simple life, raising a small herd of cattle, breaking horses, occasionally taking work tracking for the territorial marshal when times got tight. He liked the solitude, the independence. But as he heard Deanna moving around in his bedroom, he found himself thinking how empty the house usually felt, how quiet. Her presence, even under these circumstances, brought a warmth to the place that had nothing to do with the fire in the stove. Tom arrived just as the sun cleared the horizon, a grizzled man in his 50s who had worked ranches all his life. Jack took him aside and explained that he would be gone for about 2 weeks, maybe a bit longer. Tom asked no questions, just nodded and set about his chores. Jack spent the day preparing for the journey, checking tack and supplies, making sure his horses were in good condition. He had two, a reliable bay gelding named Rusty that he used for long trips, and a gentler mare named Sadie that would be perfect for Deanna. He brought food to Deanna throughout the day, and each time he saw her, he noticed small changes. The fear in her eyes was gradually being replaced by determination. She was thinking ahead now, planning. It was good to see. That evening, as they ate dinner together in the small house, she finally asked him about himself. "You live out here alone," she said, looking around the tidy but sparse interior. "For the most part. Tom helps with the ranch, but he has his own place in town. I like the quiet. No wife. No family nearby." Jack shook his head. "My parents passed when I was young. Influenza outbreak took them both within a week of each other. My sister Sarah raised me, even though she was only 16 at the time." When I was old enough to make my own way, she moved to Prescott and started her boarding house. I visit when I can, and she writes regularly. She sounds like a good person. She is the best person I know, Jack said with a smile. You will like her, and she will like you. Deanna looked down at her plate. You seem very certain of that. I am. Sarah has a good heart. She helps people who need it, asks no questions, judges no one. It is why her boarding house is always full. People feel safe there. Safe, Deanna repeated softly. I would like to feel safe again. You will, Jack promised. I will make sure of it. She looked up at him, and something passed between them, a connection that made his pulse quicken. He had thought her beautiful last night despite her injuries. Now, even with the bruises still livid on her skin, he found himself captivated by her strength, her resilience, the way she held herself together even though she must want to fall apart. He stood abruptly, gathering the plates. We should both get some rest. Early start tomorrow. That night, Jack again gave Deanna the bed while he took the chair. But as he lay there in the darkness, listening to the soft sounds of her breathing from the other room, he knew that something had changed. In the space of 24 hours, this woman had become important to him in a way he could not fully explain. It was not just duty or chivalry that made him want to protect her. It was something deeper, something that both excited and terrified him. They set out before dawn, riding through the cool desert morning as the stars faded overhead. Deanna sat Sadie well, moving with the horse's rhythm despite her injuries. She had changed back into her dress, the torn shoulder hastily mended with supplies Jack had given her, and wore a wide-brimmed hat he had found for her to shield her face from the sun. For the first few hours they rode in silence, Jack setting a steady pace and keeping watch on the trail behind them. He saw no signs of pursuit, but he remained vigilant. Martin Keller might be a drunk and a brute, but that did not mean he was stupid. As the sun climbed higher, they stopped to water the horses at a small creek. Deanna dismounted stiffly, and Jack saw her wince as her feet hit the ground. You are hurting, he observed. I will be fine. We should keep moving. We can afford a short rest. Come, sit in the shade. He led her to a spot beneath a towering saguaro cactus and helped her settle onto a flat rock. She sighed, closing her eyes and lifting her face to the slight breeze. Even exhausted and bruised, she was lovely. It made him angry all over again at the man who had damaged her. Tell me about Prescott, she said, opening her eyes and looking at him. What is it like? Jack settled beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. It is bigger than Vulture City, more established. The territorial capital is there, so there are government buildings, real law and order. Sarah's boarding house is on a quiet street near Courthouse Square. Good neighborhood, safe. She caters mostly to single women and widows, teachers and shop clerks, that sort. It sounds nice. It is. You will have your own room, privacy. Sarah will find work for you if you want it, or help you find employment elsewhere if you prefer. Either way, you will have a place to stay while you get back on your feet. Diana was quiet for a moment, then said, You are being very kind to me, Jack. I do not understand why. Most men would have turned me away, or worse, would have expected payment for their help. Jack felt heat rise in his face. I am not most men, and you do not owe me anything, Deanna. I am doing this because it is right, not because I expect something in return. She studied him with those green eyes, and he saw tears gathering at the corners. I am not used to kindness, not anymore. Martin was so charming at first, so attentive. By the time I saw who he really was, it was too late. We were already married, already here. I had nothing and no one. You have someone now, Jack said quietly. Even if it is just for these few days, you are not alone. A single tear tracked down her cheek, and without thinking, he reached out and wiped it away with his thumb. The moment his skin touched hers, he felt something electric pass between them. Deanna's breath caught, and he saw her pupils dilate. For a long moment they simply stared at each other, the desert quiet around them except for the whisper of wind through the cacti. Jack pulled his hand back, clearing his throat. "We should get moving. Want to make good distance before the heat gets too bad." They rode hard for the next several hours, stopping only briefly when necessary. Jack kept them off the main trails, using his knowledge of the territory to find paths that would hide their passage. He had spent years learning this land, first as a scout during some of the conflicts with various groups, then as a tracker and guide. He knew every water hole, every hidden canyon, every shortcut that could shave hours off a journey. As evening approached, they made camp in a small box canyon that offered protection on 3 sides. Jack set about building a fire while Deanna tended to the horses, and he was pleased to see how capable she was with them. She spoke softly to Sadie and Rusty, checking their hooves and rubbing them down with practiced hands. "You know horses," he commented as she joined him by the fire. "My father was a farrier back in Missouri. Before he died, he taught me everything he knew. I was only 12 when we lost him, but I remember." She smiled sadly. That was another thing Martin hated, said it was not proper for a wife of his to smell like horses and leather. Martin was a fool. Deanna laughed, a real laugh that transformed her face despite the bruises. Yes, he was. They ate a simple meal of beans and hardtack, washing it down with coffee that Jack made strong and sweet the way he liked it. As darkness fell and the stars emerged in the vast Arizona sky, Deanna wrapped herself in the blanket he provided and gazed upward. "I forgot how beautiful the stars could be," she murmured. "In San Francisco, you could barely see them through all the smoke and fog, and Martin never wanted to sit outside. He preferred saloons." Jack followed her gaze. "I never get tired of them. Some nights I will sit for hours just watching, thinking about how small we are, how big the world is." "You ever get lonely, out here by yourself?" He considered the question. "Sometimes, but I prefer loneliness to bad company. I have seen what happens when people stay in situations that hurt them just because they are afraid to be alone. It never ends well." Diana turned to look at him, and in the firelight her eyes were luminous. "Is that why you never married? Because you have not found the right company?" "Partly. Mostly I have been too busy building the ranch, making a life for myself. Romance seemed like a luxury I could not afford." He paused, then added, "Until recently, I never met anyone who made me want to reconsider that." The words hung in the air between them, laden with meaning. Deanna's lips parted slightly, and he saw her pulse quicken in her throat. "Jack," she whispered, but then she stopped, seeming to lose her nerve. "You should get some sleep," he said gently, though it cost him to break the moment. "I will take first watch." She nodded and settled herself near the fire, wrapping the blanket tight around her shoulders. Within minutes, her breathing had evened out into sleep. Jack watched her for a while, memorizing the curve of her cheek, the way her hair fell across her face. Then he forced himself to turn away and focus on the darkness beyond their camp. The night passed without incident, and they were on the trail again before sunrise. The next 2 days fell into a pattern. Ride hard during the cool morning hours, rest during the worst heat of midday, then ride again until dark. They spoke more as they traveled, sharing stories from their pasts, learning about each other in the way that people do when forced into close proximity. Jack told her about growing up wild after his parents died, how Sarah had struggled to keep him in line while working 3 jobs to keep them fed. He told her about the first time he tracked a man, how terrified he had been that he would fail, and how the success had led to more work. He told her about buying his land, about the dream of building something that was entirely his own. Diana spoke of her childhood in Missouri, of her father's smithy, and the way the whole place had smelled like hot metal and coal smoke. She told him about her mother's death when she was 8, about how her father had tried his best, but had never really recovered from the loss. She told him about moving to San Francisco after her father passed, about the years of loneliness in the boarding house, sewing clothes for women who barely noticed she existed. "I think that is why I fell for Martin's lies so easily," she admitted on the third day as they walked the horses to spare them in the heat. "I was so desperate to matter to someone, to be seen and wanted. He made me feel special, at least at first." "You are special," Jack said firmly. "Not because some man says so, but because of who you are. Strong, capable, brave. You left everything familiar to come west with a man you barely knew. That took courage, or foolishness. Courage and foolishness often look the same from the outside. The difference is in the outcome." She smiled at that, and he found himself smiling back. These moments of lightness were becoming more frequent as they put distance between Diana and her old life. She was healing, not just physically, though the bruises were beginning to fade, but emotionally. He could see her confidence returning bit by bit. On the fourth day, they encountered another traveler, a merchant heading south with a wagon full of dry goods. Jack tensed, his hand moving instinctively toward his gun, but the man seemed harmless enough. He tipped his hat to Diana and asked if they had seen any trouble on the road. "All quiet," Jack replied curtly. "You headed to Vulture City, eventually, stopping at some of the mining camps first. Why? Something I should know about. Just asking. Safe travels." They parted ways, but the encounter left Jack uneasy. It was a reminder that they were not completely isolated, that word could travel. If Martin Keller was looking for Diana, he might be asking questions of travelers. That night, as they made camp, Jack's vigilance was heightened. He checked and rechecked their surroundings, made sure the horses were secure, kept his rifle close. Diana noticed his tension. "What is wrong?" she asked. "Nothing, just being careful. Jack, please do not lie to me. I have had enough lies to last a lifetime." He sighed and settled beside her. "That merchant today. He was harmless, but it reminded me that we are not invisible out here. If Keller is looking for you, he might find our trail eventually. I want to be ready." Diana paled slightly, and he cursed himself for frightening her. But she deserved the truth. "What will you do if he finds us?" she asked quietly. Jack met her eyes. "I will keep you safe, whatever it takes. I do not want you to get hurt because of me." "That is not your choice to make," he said gently. "I went into this knowing the risks. I am not afraid of Martin Keller." But Diana still looked worried, and on impulse, Jack reached out and took her hand. Her fingers were small in his, delicate but strong from years of sewing and working with horses. She did not pull away. Instead, she tightened her grip, and they sat like that for a long time, watching the fire burn down to embers. "Thank you," she whispered eventually, "for everything. For saving me, for taking me to safety, for treating me like a person instead of a burden or a piece of property." "You are neither of those things," Jack said. "You are a woman who deserves respect and kindness and the chance to build the life she wants." Diana turned to face him fully, and in the fading firelight, he saw something new in her expression. It was not just gratitude or relief. It was something deeper, warmer. It was the same thing he had been trying to ignore in himself for days now. "Jack, she began, but he gently pressed a finger to her lips. "Not yet," he said softly. "You have been through too much, too recently. Your emotions are raw. I will not take advantage of that." "You think this is just gratitude?" she asked, her voice gaining strength. "You think I do not know my own mind? I think you have spent 6 months being controlled and hurt by a man who claimed to care for you." I think you need time to heal, to figure out who you are without someone telling you. And I think if there is something real between us, it will still be there when you have had that time." Diana's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "How are you real? How does a man like you exist?" "I am nothing special. Just someone who was raised right and tries to do better." She leaned forward then and pressed a soft kiss to his cheek. It was over in an instant, but the warmth of it lingered long after she had pulled away and settled down to sleep. Jack sat watch that night with his heart hammering in his chest, knowing that he had already fallen for Diana Lambert, knowing that there was no going back from it. He could only hope that she would come to feel the same way, not out of gratitude or fear or desperation, but because she genuinely wanted him. They reached Prescott on the afternoon of the 6th day, riding into town as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains. The town was bustling with activity, miners and ranchers and businessmen filling the streets. Diana looked around with wide eyes, taking in the sturdy buildings and the relative order compared to Vulture City's rougher edges. Sarah's boarding house was exactly as Jack had described it. A neat two-story building painted white with blue shutters and a well-tended garden in front. As they dismounted, the front door flew open and a woman emerged, wiping her hands on her apron. Sarah Jefferson was 34 years old but could have passed for younger, with dark hair streaked with early gray and kind eyes that were the same blue as her brother's. She took one look at Jack and Diana and seemed to understand the entire situation in an instant. "Jack," she said warmly, embracing her brother. Then she turned to Diana and took her hands gently. "And you must be the friend Jack mentioned in his telegram. Welcome to my home." Diana glanced at Jack in surprise. "Telegram? I sent one from our last stop," he admitted. "Wanted to make sure Sarah was expecting us." Sarah ushered them inside, calling for one of her boarders to help with the horses. The interior of the house was as welcoming as the exterior, with comfortable furniture and lace curtains and the smell of fresh bread filling the air. "Diana, let me show you to your room," Sarah said. "You must be exhausted from the journey. Jack, you know where everything is. Make yourself useful in the kitchen." Jack watched as his sister led Diana upstairs, and he felt a pang at the separation even though he knew it was necessary. Over the past 6 days, he had grown accustomed to Diana's presence, to the sound of her voice and the sight of her smile. The house felt emptier without her nearby. He went to the kitchen as instructed and found the water kettle, setting it to boil for tea. Sarah joined him a few minutes later, closing the door behind her. "All right, little brother, tell me everything." So he did, speaking quietly but leaving nothing out. He told her about Diana's arrival at his door, about the bruises and the fear, about Martin Keller and the desperate flight to safety. He told her about the journey, about getting to know Diana, about the feelings that had developed despite his best efforts to keep things professional. Sarah listened without interrupting, her expression growing increasingly troubled. When Jack finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "You are in love with her," she said finally. "It was not a question." "I do not know, maybe it is too soon to call it that. Jack, I raised you. I know when you are lying, and I know when you are lying to yourself. You are in love with her." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "Even if I am, it does not matter. She needs time to heal. She needs to figure out her own life without a man complicating things." "That is very noble of you," Sarah said. "Also very stupid." "What? Jack, that woman just fled an abusive marriage. Do you really think what she needs is for another man to make decisions about what is best for her?" Sarah shook her head. "If you care for her, tell her. Let her decide what she wants. Give her that choice. She is vulnerable right now. Her judgment might not be clear." "Or," Sarah countered, "she is a grown woman who is perfectly capable of knowing her own heart. Do not make the mistake of treating her like she is fragile or broken. She survived, Jack. She fought and ran and saved herself. Give her credit for that." Jack absorbed his sister's words, recognizing the truth in them. He had been so focused on protecting Diana that he had not considered he might be taking away her agency in a different way. "What if she does not feel the same way?" he asked quietly. Sarah laughed softly. "Oh, Jack, you should have seen the way she looked at you when I mentioned your name. That woman has feelings for you whether she has admitted them to herself or not." Before Jack could respond, there was a knock at the kitchen door. Sarah opened it to reveal Diana, who had changed into a simple dress that Sarah must have provided. The bruises on her face had faded to yellow and green, far less shocking than they had been a week ago. "I am sorry to interrupt," Diana said. "I wanted to thank you, Sarah, for taking me in. Jack has told me how kind you are, and I can already see he was right." "You are very welcome here," Sarah said warmly. "Stay as long as you need, and speaking of which, I should go check on dinner." "You two talk." She slipped out of the kitchen, giving Jack a meaningful look as she passed. Jack found himself alone with Diana for the first time since they had arrived, and suddenly he did not know what to say. "Your sister is wonderful," Diana offered, breaking the awkward silence. "She is. Best person I know, like I said." Jack gestured to the table. "Sit. I made tea." They settled across from each other, and for a while they sipped their tea in companionable quiet. But Jack could feel the weight of unspoken words between them, could sense that something needed to be said. "What happens now?" Diana asked finally. "For us, I mean. You have done what you set out to do. You have brought me to safety. Do you go back to your ranch?" "That was the plan," Jack admitted. "But I find myself reluctant to leave." "Why?" He took a breath, remembering Sarah's words. Diana deserved honesty. She deserved the choice. "Because somewhere between your knock on my door and here, I have developed feelings for you. Real feelings, not just protectiveness or duty. I care about you, Diana, and the thought of riding away and not knowing if I will see you again is harder than I expected." Diana's eyes widened, and color rose in her cheeks. "Jack, wait, let me finish. I know the timing is terrible. I know you have just escaped a nightmare and you need time to heal and find yourself again. I am not asking you for anything. I just wanted you to know how I feel. And I want you to know that whatever you decide, I will respect it. If you want me to leave and never contact you again, I will do that. If you want me to stay in touch as a friend, I will do that too. This is your choice, Diana. Entirely yours." Tears were streaming down her face now, but she was smiling through them. "You foolish, wonderful man, do you really not know? Can you really not see what you mean to me?" Jack's heart was pounding so hard he thought it might break through his ribs. "Tell me." "I was terrified when I knocked on your door that night. I expected to be turned away or worse. But you took me in. You cared for me. You treated me with gentleness and respect when all I had known for months was violence and cruelty. Every day on our journey here, I found myself watching you, listening to you, learning who you are. And every day, I fell a little more in love with you." "Diana," he breathed. "I know it is fast. I know it seems impossible. But Martin taught me what love is not, and you have shown me what it could be. I do not want you to leave, Jack. I want you to stay. I want time to know you better, to court properly if that is what you want. But I already know, deep in my heart, that you are a good man. The best man I have ever known." Jack stood, moving around the table, and Diana rose to meet him. He cupped her face gently in his hands, mindful of the fading bruises, and looked into her eyes. "I will court you properly," he promised. "I will take things as slow as you need. But Diana, you should know that I am already certain. I want a future with you if you will have me." "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, to all of it." He kissed her then, soft and careful, and felt her melt into him. It was nothing like the desperate passion of romance novels. It was better, sweeter, full of promise and hope and the beginning of something real. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling, and for the first time since he had met her, Jack saw Deanna look truly, completely happy. The next weeks passed in a warm haze of courtship and discovery. Jack extended his stay in Prescott, taking a room at a nearby hotel so as to maintain Deanna's reputation. Every day he would come to the boarding house and they would spend time together, sometimes walking through town, sometimes simply sitting in Sarah's parlor and talking. Deanna flourished in the safe environment Sarah provided. She took work helping at the boarding house, cooking and cleaning and managing the books with a skill that surprised and impressed Sarah. She proved to have a head for numbers and organization, and Sarah began relying on her more and more. But it was the changes in Diana's spirit that Jack cherished most. The fear gradually left her eyes. Her laugh became more frequent and genuine. She began to carry herself with confidence, to speak her mind without fear of retribution. She was becoming who she was always meant to be, free from the shadow of Martin Keller's abuse. For his part, Jack found himself happier than he had ever been. Courting Diana was a joy unlike anything he had experienced. They would talk for hours about everything and nothing. She taught him to see beauty in small things, like the way light filtered through leaves or the perfect fold of a piece of fabric. He taught her to raid the desert, to understand the land and the sky and the creatures that called it home. 1 month became 2, and Jack knew he needed to return to his ranch eventually. Tom was capable, but the place needed its owner. Yet every time he thought about leaving, about being apart from Diana, his chest tightened with an almost physical pain. It was Sarah who finally forced the issue. "You need to go back to your ranch, Jack," she said one evening when Diana had gone to bed. "And you need to figure out what you are going to do about her." "What do you mean?" "I mean, are you going to marry her or not? Because this limbo you are both in is not fair to either of you." "I want to marry her," Jack admitted. "But is it too soon? She has only been free of Keller for 2 months. Have you asked her what she thinks?" "No, then maybe you should. Stop making decisions for her, Jack. Trust her to know her own mind." So the next day, Jack asked Deanna to go for a walk with him. They strolled through Prescott's streets until they reached a quiet spot overlooking the valley, and there, with the Arizona mountains as their witness, Jack took both of her hands in his. "Diana, I know we have not known each other long. I know you have been through hell and might need more time, but I cannot imagine my life without you in it. I love you. I want to marry you, to build a life with you on my ranch, to wake up every morning knowing you are beside me. But only if that is what you want. So I am asking, will you marry me?" Deanna's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling that beautiful smile that made his heart sing. "Jack Jefferson, I have been waiting for you to ask me that question for weeks. Yes, yes, I will marry you." He pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply this time, with all the passion and love he had been holding back. She responded in kind, her arms wrapping around his neck, and for a moment the whole world fell away until there was nothing but the two of them. They married 3 weeks later in a small ceremony at the courthouse, with Sarah and a few of her boarders as witnesses. Deanna wore a simple blue dress that Sarah had helped her make, and Jack wore his best shirt and jacket. It was not a grand affair, but it was perfect. The marriage raised the question of what to do about Martin Keller. Legally, Deanna was still married to him, though she had not heard from him since the night she fled. Jack consulted with a lawyer in Prescott who explained that getting an annulment or divorce would be complicated and might draw unwanted attention. "Or," the lawyer said carefully, "you could simply not worry about it. The territory is big, records are spotty. If you say you are married, who is going to question it? especially if you move to a different area. It was not ideal, but it was practical. Jack and Deanna decided to return to his ranch and live as man and wife. Legal technicalities be damned. If Keller ever surfaced, they would deal with it then. But for now, they wanted to focus on their future, not her past. The journey back to the ranch was nothing like the desperate flight 2 months earlier. This time they rode side by side, taking their time, stopping to camp under the stars and talk about their dreams. Deanna told Jack she wanted children eventually, a house full of laughter and love. Jack told her he wanted to expand the ranch, maybe start breeding horses more seriously. They talked about everything, planning a life together with the kind of hope that had seemed impossible such a short time ago. When they finally arrived at the ranch, Tom was there to greet them, his weathered face breaking into a rare smile when he saw them together. "About time you brought yourself a wife," he said gruffly. "Place has been too quiet without you." Deanna loved the ranch immediately. She walked through the modest house, touching everything, seeing the potential where Jack had only ever seen functionality. Within days, she had begun making small changes, adding curtains she sewed herself, arranging wildflowers in jars, turning the bare house into a home. Jack found himself watching her constantly, still amazed that she was his, that they had found each other against all odds. At night, lying beside her in the bed they now shared, he would listen to her breathe and thank whatever force in the universe had brought her to his door that desperate midnight. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Jack worked the ranch with Tom's help, while Deanna managed the house and began a vegetable garden. She proved to have a gift for growing things, and soon they had fresh produce that supplemented their meals. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch and watch the sunset, talking or simply enjoying each other's presence. 3 months into their marriage, Deanna began feeling unwell in the mornings. At first she tried to hide it, but Jack noticed how pale she looked, how she sometimes had to run outside suddenly. When he confronted her about it, she blushed and admitted her suspicions. "I think I might be with child," she said quietly. "It is still early, but the signs are there." Jack felt a rush of emotion so intense it nearly brought him to his knees. A child, their child. He pulled Deanna into his arms, holding her close. "Are you happy?" she asked, her voice muffled against his chest. "Happy does not begin to cover it," he said. "Are you?" She pulled back to look at him, and he saw joy shining in her eyes along with a hint of fear. "I am happy, also terrified. I have never been a mother before, and I have never been a father. We will figure it out together." As Deanna's pregnancy progressed, Jack became almost comically protective. He insisted she rest more, try to take over her chores, worried constantly about her health. She tolerated his hovering with good-natured patience, though she frequently reminded him that women had been having babies since the beginning of time, and she was perfectly capable. Sarah came to visit when Deanna was 6 months along, staying for 2 weeks and bringing supplies and advice. She and Deanna spent hours talking about what to expect, and Jack was grateful for his sister's steady presence. Sarah had helped birth many babies over the years, running a boarding house full of women, and her experience was invaluable. "She is strong," Sarah told Jack one evening as they watched Deanna knit tiny booties by the fireplace. "She will be fine. Stop worrying so much." "I cannot help it. She is everything to me." "I know. And she knows too. That is why she puts up with your fussing." The baby came on a cold January night in 1882, nearly a year after Deanna had first knocked on Jack's door. The labor was long and difficult, and Jack spent most of it pacing outside the bedroom where Sarah and a midwife from town attended to Deanna. He could hear her cries of pain, and each one felt like a knife to his heart. Finally, as dawn was breaking, he heard a different sound. A baby's cry, loud and lusty and absolutely beautiful. Sarah emerged, exhausted but smiling. "You have a son, Jack, and Deanna is asking for you." He rushed into the room and found Deanna propped up in bed, looking equally exhausted but radiant with a tiny bundle cradled in her arms. She looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. "Meet your son," she said softly. Jack approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the baby. He was red-faced and wrinkled, with a shock of dark hair and tiny fists waving in the air. He was the most perfect thing Jack had ever seen. "What should we name him?" Deanna asked. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but had never settled on anything. Now, looking at his son, Jack knew. "James," he said. "After my father, James Jefferson." Deanna smiled. "James, I like it." "Hello, James. Welcome to the world." Jack sat beside them on the bed, wrapping his arms around his wife and son, and felt a completeness he had never known was possible. This was his family. This was everything. The first year of James's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and small miracles. Every smile, every new sound was a cause for celebration. Deanna proved to be a natural mother, patient and loving, though she also made sure to carve out time for herself and for her marriage to Jack. They had both come from backgrounds where they knew what it was like to be neglected, and they were determined to give their son better. The ranch prospered. Word had spread about Jack's skill with horses, and he began getting requests to break and train horses for ranchers and the cavalry both. The money was good, and it allowed them to make improvements, to build a larger barn, to hire additional help during busy seasons. Diana's garden expanded into a small orchard, and she began selling her excess produce in Vulture City. She proved to have a knack for business, negotiating fair prices and building relationships with merchants. She and Jack made a good team, each contributing their strengths to their shared life. When James was 2 years old, Diana became pregnant again. This time Jack was calmer, though still protective. The pregnancy was easier than the first, and in the spring of 1884 they welcomed a daughter they named Sarah, after Jack's sister. The real Sarah came to visit as soon as she heard, arriving with gifts and blessings and staying long enough to help Diana adjust to managing 2 small children. She doted on her namesake and on James, who was already showing signs of his father's love for horses and the outdoors. "You have built something beautiful here," Sarah told Jack one evening as they watched Deanna play with the children in the yard. "A real family, a good life. I am proud of you." "I could not have done it without you," Jack said. "You raised me right. You gave me the example of what strength and kindness look like." Sarah hugged her brother. "You always had it in you. You just needed the right person to bring it out. Deanna is good for you. She is my whole world, her and the children." Time continued its steady march. The children grew, healthy and happy. James became a serious, thoughtful boy who loved working alongside his father on the ranch. Sarah was bright and curious, always asking questions, always getting into mischief. Jack and Deanna raised them with love and firm guidance, teaching them the value of hard work and kindness. One afternoon in the summer of 1886, when James was 4 and Sarah was 2, a rider approached the ranch. Jack was working in the corral with a young stallion when he noticed the stranger, and something about the man's bearing put him on alert. He handed the horse off to Tom and walked out to meet the visitor. The man was in his 40s, well-dressed but travel-worn. He dismounted and approached Jack with a cautious expression. "Jack Jefferson?" he asked. "That is right. What can I do for you? My name is Robert Chen. I am a lawyer from San Francisco. I am looking for a woman named Deanna Lambert." Jack's hand instinctively moved toward his gun. "Why?" I have news regarding her husband, Martin Keller. Is she here? Is she all right? Jack's mind raced. Deanna was in the house with the children. He did not want this stranger anywhere near his family until he knew what was going on. What news? He asked flatly. Chen seemed to read the danger in Jack's stance and held up his hands. Nothing bad, I promise you. In fact, I think she will be pleased. Martin Keller died 3 months ago in San Francisco. Liver failure brought on by excessive drinking. I have been trying to locate his wife to inform her. She is his legal heir. Jack felt the world shift beneath his feet. Keller was dead. Deanna was free, truly free. She is here, he said slowly. And I should tell you, she is my wife now. We married nearly 5 years ago. Chen raised an eyebrow. I see. Well, legally that marriage would not be valid since she was still married to Keller. But with his death, that point is moot. You are free to marry legally now if you wish. What about this inheritance you mentioned? Keller had a small sum saved, and there is the matter of some possessions. Not much, but I am obligated to see it goes to his legal widow. Will you take me to her? Jack led Chen to the house, his mind still reeling. He found Deanna in the kitchen, kneading bread dough while keeping an eye on Sarah, who was playing with wooden blocks on the floor. She looked up as the men entered and her face went pale when she saw the stranger. Deanna, Jack said gently, this is Robert Chen. He is a lawyer from San Francisco. He has news about Martin Keller. Deanna's hands stilled on the dough. What kind of news? He is dead, Chen said quietly. I am sorry for your loss. But Deanna did not look sorrowful. She looked stunned, then slowly relief spread across her face. Dead, are you certain? Quite certain, madam. He passed 3 months ago. I have the death certificate here if you need to see it. Deanna shook her head slowly. No. I believe you. How did he die? His liver failed. The doctor said it was inevitable given his drinking. Deanna looked at Jack and he saw tears forming in her eyes, but they were not tears of grief. They were tears of relief, of freedom finally, truly realized. Thank you for telling me, she said to Chen. Was there anything else? Chen explained about the small inheritance, about the few possessions that Keller had left behind. It was not much, maybe $100 and some personal items, but Deanna accepted it without emotion. When Chen left an hour later, she stood on the porch and watched him ride away, Jack's arm around her shoulders. I never wished him dead, she said quietly. But I cannot pretend I am not relieved. For years, I have been looking over my shoulder, waiting for him to find me to try to take me back. Now I can stop. You were always safe here, Jack reminded her. I would never have let him take you, I know. But there is a difference between feeling protected and feeling truly free. Now I am both. That night, after the children were asleep, Jack and Deanna sat together on their bed and talked about what Chen had said. They were not legally married, at least not according to the law, but they had lived as husband and wife for nearly 5 years. They had children together. They had built a life. Do you want to make it legal? Jack asked. We could go to Prescott, marry properly at the courthouse. Deanna considered this. Part of me wants to, part of me does not see the point. We know we are married. God knows we are married. What does it matter what some piece of paper says? It matters for the children, for their inheritance rights, for their legitimacy in the eyes of the law. Then we should do it. For them. So a month later, they made the trip to Prescott with James and Sarah, leaving Tom in charge of the ranch. They stayed with Sarah Jefferson, who was delighted to see them and thrilled at the idea of witnessing their official marriage. The ceremony was simple, just like the first one had been, but somehow more meaningful. This time there was no shadow hanging over them, no fear of the past catching up. They stood before the justice of the peace and spoke their vows with their children as witnesses. And when the official pronounced them husband and wife, Jack kissed Deanna with all the love and passion of their years together. Finally, she said with a laugh when they pulled apart. "I am officially Mrs. Jefferson." "You have always been Mrs. Jefferson," Jack corrected. "This just makes it official." They celebrated that night at Sarah's boarding house, surrounded by friends both old and new. Sarah made a feast, and they toasted to love and second chances and the beauty of new beginnings. James and little Sarah ran around with the other children who lived in the boarding house, their laughter filling the air. Later, when the children were finally asleep and Jack and Diana had retired to the guest room Sarah provided, they lay together in the darkness, talking softly. "You ever think about that night?" Diana asked. "When I knocked on your door?" "Every day," Jack admitted. "I think about how easily things could have gone differently. What if I had turned you away? What if you had gone to someone else? But you did not turn me away, and I came to you. It was fate, I think. We were meant to find each other." "I believe that too." Deanna was quiet for a moment, then said, "I want to have more children, if you want them too." Jack pulled her closer. "I would love nothing more. How many are you thinking?" "As many as we are blessed with. I want a house full of love and noise and chaos. I want the childhood I never had, and I want to give it to our children." "Then that is what we will have," Jack promised, and they did. Over the next 8 years, Deanna gave birth to 3 more children. A son they named Thomas in honor of their loyal ranch hand, a daughter called Margaret who was sweet and gentle, and finally another son, William, who came as a surprise when Deanna was 38 and Jack was 42. The ranch expanded to accommodate their growing family. Jack built additions onto the house, creating more bedrooms and a larger kitchen where Deanna could cook and bake with her daughters. They hired more help as the horse breeding business grew, employing several ranch hands and even a housekeeper to assist Deanna with the endless work of managing such a large household. The children thrived. James grew into a responsible young man who took his role as eldest seriously, helping his father with the horses and looking after his younger siblings. Sarah proved to be brilliant with numbers and took over managing the ranch's accounts when she was just 15. Thomas was the wild one, always getting into scrapes, always pushing boundaries but with a good heart underneath the mischief. Margaret was the peacemaker, gentle and kind, with her mother's gift for growing things. And William, the baby, was doted on by everyone. Through it all, Jack and Diana's love only deepened. They made it a point to carve out time for just the two of them, taking evening rides when the children were old enough to be left with the housekeeper, sitting together on the porch after everyone else had gone to bed. They talked about everything, never running out of things to say, never losing the connection that had sparked that first night. Sarah Jefferson remained a constant presence in their lives, visiting at least twice a year and hosting the family in Prescott whenever they could make the trip. She watched her brother's family grow with satisfaction, proud of the life he had built, the man he had become. Tom stayed with them until he died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 72, having become as much a part of the family as anyone born into it. The children called him Uncle Tom and mourned him deeply when he passed. As the years rolled on, the Arizona Territory changed around them. In 1912, it finally achieved statehood, and Jack and Deanna celebrated along with everyone else. Their oldest children were grown by then, James married with children of his own, Sarah running the ranch's business operations with ruthless efficiency. But through all the changes, the ranch remained a constant, a place of safety and love that Jack and Diana had built together. It was the physical manifestation of their marriage, something they had created through hard work and dedication, and an unshakable commitment to each other. On a warm evening in the spring of 1915, as the sun set over the desert in a blaze of orange and gold, Jack and Deanna sat on their porch as they had countless times before. They were both in their 60s now, their hair gray, their faces lined with the evidence of lives well lived. But when they looked at each other, they still saw the young man and woman who had found each other in the darkness. "You have any regrets?" Deanna asked, her hand in his. Jack considered the question seriously. "Not a one. Every choice I made led me to you and to this life. What about you?" Deanna smiled, that same beautiful smile that had captured his heart 33 years ago. "My only regret is not finding you sooner, but I suppose I needed to walk through the darkness to appreciate the light." "You are my light," Jack said softly. "You have been since the moment you knocked on my door. And you are my savior, my hero, my everything." They sat in comfortable silence, watching as their grandchildren played in the yard, as their grown children moved about the ranch, taking care of the evening chores. This was their legacy, Jack thought. Not just the land or the business, but the love they had created, the family they had built, the safe haven they had established in the wild territory. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and challenges. They watched their children marry and have children of their own. They celebrated birthdays and holidays surrounded by family. They weathered droughts and good years, losses and gains, always together, always united. In 1925, when Jack was 69 and Deanna was 65, they celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary. By then, they had 15 grandchildren and 3 great-grandchildren. The family gathered at the ranch for a massive celebration, with people coming from as far away as California and Texas. As Jack looked around at the crowd of people, all of them connected to him and Deanna through bonds of blood and love, he was overwhelmed with gratitude. This was what they had built. This was the life that had grown from that one desperate knock on his door so many years ago. Deanna found him standing alone for a moment, watching the festivities, and slipped her hand into his. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "I am thinking about how lucky I am. How blessed we are, all of this, Deanna. We created all of this." "We did," she agreed. "And it is beautiful. You are beautiful, just as beautiful as the day I first saw you." She laughed, that musical sound he had loved for 4 decades. "Jack Jefferson, you are a terrible liar. I am old and wrinkled. You are distinguished and elegant, and you are still the most beautiful woman in the world to me." She kissed him then in front of everyone, and their children and grandchildren cheered. It was a kiss full of history and memory, of promises kept and dreams realized, of a love that had only grown stronger with time. They lived to see their golden wedding anniversary in 1935, a remarkable achievement in that era. By then, they were both slowing down, their bodies feeling the weight of their years. But their minds remained sharp, and their love remained as vibrant as ever. Jack passed away peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1937, at the age of 81. He died in the bed he had shared with Deanna for more than half a century, with her hand in his and all his children gathered around. His last words were, "I love you," spoken to the woman who had changed his life. Deanna mourned him deeply, but without bitterness. She had been blessed with 55 years of his love, had built a life beyond her wildest dreams. She lived another 2 years, spending her time surrounded by family, telling stories of the early days to her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. When she died in the spring of 1939, at the age of 79, her family buried her beside Jack on a hillside overlooking the ranch. The headstone they erected was simple but perfect. "Here lie Jack and Deanna Jefferson, together forever, as they were always meant to be." The ranch continued to thrive under the management of their children and grandchildren, a lasting testament to what Jack and Deanna had built. But more than the physical legacy, They left behind a story of love that transcended circumstance, of two people who had found each other in the darkness and built something beautiful in the light. Years later, when the great-grandchildren asked about how Jack and Deanna had met, the story was always told the same way. She knocked on his door covered in bruises, and the cowboy said he would never let anyone touch her again. And he kept that promise for the rest of their lives, loving her through every challenge, every joy, every moment they were blessed to share. It was a love story for the ages, born in the Wild West, forged in adversity, and sustained through dedication and choice. It was proof that even in the darkest moments, hope could be found, that even in the roughest places, love could bloom, that two broken people could come together and create something whole and beautiful and lasting. The ranch still stood decades later, a monument to Jack and Deanna Jefferson, to their love and their legacy. And on quiet evenings, when the desert wind whispered through the sage and the sun set in that same blaze of gold and orange, it was easy to imagine them there still, sitting on their porch, hands intertwined, watching over the family they had created and the love that would never die. Their story had started with a desperate knock on a door at midnight, a woman fleeing violence and a man willing to help. It had grown into something neither of them could have imagined, a partnership, a family, a legacy that would span generations. They had faced down fear and built something beautiful in its place. They had chosen love over and over again, every single day until their last breaths. And in the end, that was what mattered. Not the bruises that had brought Deanna to Jack's door, but the healing that had followed. Not the fear and violence of her first marriage, but the love and respect of her second. Not the hard years or the struggles, but the joy and the family and the life they had created together. Jack Jefferson had promised Deanna Lambert that Martin Keller would never touch her again, and he had kept that promise. But more than that, he had given her something she had never had before, a love that was gentle and kind, that lifted her up instead of tearing her down, that saw her as a partner, and an equal rather than a possession. And Deanna had given Jack something equally precious, a purpose beyond himself, a family to love and protect, a reason to build something lasting rather than just surviving day to day. Together, they had created a love story that would be remembered and retold for generations, a reminder that even in the wildest, hardest places, love could not only survive but thrive, that broken people could heal, that second chances were real, that happily ever after was not just a fairy tale, but something that could be built with patience, dedication, and an unwavering commitment to choosing love every single day. Their story ended not with tragedy but with triumph, not with bitterness but with joy, not with regret but with gratitude for every moment they had been given. And when their descendants gathered at the ranch for reunions and celebrations, they would always raise a glass to Jack and Deanna, to the love that had started it all, to the couple who had proven that even the darkest night eventually gives way to dawn.